It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as we have more on a potential match between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. A WWE champion has been forced to vacate their championship, and AEW could be set to hold their first ever hair versus hair match. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first... Ring of Honor held their Death Before Dishonor event live from the ECW arena last night, and the show saw a brand new #1 contender for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Recently released NXT star Alex Zane, formerly known as Ari Sterling, won the 15-man Honor Rumble. He will now battle the still Ring of Honor champion Bandito, who won the 4-way elimination main event, outlasting Brody King, EC3, and Demonic Flamita. The event also saw two new champions, as the first ever Ring of Honor Women's Champion was crowned in the finals of the championship tournament, with Roxy pinning a Miranda Elias for the victory. A brand new Ring of Honor Pure Champion was also crowned after Josh Wood hit former champion Jonathan Gresham with a huge suplex for the 1-2-3. Gresham put the title around the new champion's waist after the match in a show of respect, marking the end of his 385-day reign. AEW All Out 2021 was one of the most talked about pay-per-views in many years, and we now have an update regarding the buy rate of the show. AEW President Tony Khan appeared on Busted Open Radio last week and confirmed All Out drew well over 200,000 buys, making it the biggest non-WWE event since 1999. Tony revealed, "It's great to be able to tell you guys that our pay-per-view did well over 200,000 buys, which is a big milestone that nobody has hit in this country for a long time. So it's a pretty special week for AEW." The last time a non-WWE pay-per-view reached these heights was WCW Spring Stampede in 1999. We now have more on the situation, this time from Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer, who noted the pay-per-view buys through online streaming services such as Fight accounted for 115,000, double that of the All Out 2020 pay-per-view. Meltzer also estimated that the promotion drew in $5 million from pay-per-view buys, tickets, merchandise, and theater buys. This of course means that this is the most successful AEW pay-per-view to date, as the promotion continues to make huge strides. The show saw the debuts of big names like Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Minoru Suzuki, and Ruby Soho, and also featured the in-ring debut of longtime absentee CM Punk. And next up, AEW were set to host the AEW Full Gear pay-per-view live from St. Louis, Missouri on November 6th, but it seems that plans are set to change. According to the Wrestling Observer, AEW will instead hold the event from Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota. The show has also been pushed back 1 week due to a clash with UFC's return to Madison Square Garden on the same night, and the show will instead take place 1 week later on November 13th. As a result of this date change, AEW will likely be forced to pull Jon Moxley from a scheduled appearance at New Japan's Battle of the Valley show in San Jose, California, which will now take place on the same night as Full Gear. Last week, Pro Wrestling Illustrated released their annual PWI 500, which ranks the best male wrestlers in the world. This time around, current AEW World Champion Kenny Omega came out on top, closely followed by the WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns, who has been doing the best work of his career. Omega recently spoke on the PWI podcast and discussed the rankings, stating that he thinks it was a closely fought contest, and named 3 other wrestlers that could have easily won, and said, "It's fantastic that I don't feel like, no matter how I look at it, I didn't run away with it. I don't think I was #1 by far. I think the best part about this year especially is you could have went in multiple directions and no one would be disappointed. I feel that up until his unfortunate injury, #1 could have been Will Ospreay. #1 could have easily been Shingo Takagi. #1 could have easily been Roman Reigns. Everyone had such a strong year." All 3 men mentioned by Omega were in the top 10 of the list, with Ospreay coming in at 7th, Takagi coming in at 9th, and as mentioned, Reigns was in at number 2. It is very likely that Ospreay would have been in the top 3 if he hadn't picked up an injury earlier this year, which forced him to vacate his IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, although he was ranked higher than the current champion Shingo Takagi. Over the past few days, fans had wondered if a recent Twitter spat between the aforementioned Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega would lead up to an in-ring battle somewhere down the line, and we now have an update from the Wrestling Observer regarding the matter. According to the report, there are no plans in place for the match to take place, although it was noted that both men do want it to happen. Ospreay is currently wrestling in the United States and is set to appear at the upcoming New Japan Strong tapings in Los Angeles, and in storyline he's currently refusing to work matches in Japan due to the promotion stripping him of his IWGP World Heavyweight title, and is carrying his own version of the belt, claiming to be the true champion. This makes it the perfect time for the match to happen with no travel restrictions getting in the way, but it's no doubt a little bit more complicated than that due to one of them having to take a loss, something that would need to be negotiated between both AEW and New Japan. It was also noted that Kenny Omega wants a match with the current never openweight champion and leader of the Bullet Club, Jay White, who recently appeared in Impact Wrestling as part of the Forbidden Door trades. Next up, we have a report from Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net, who has revealed that WWE has undergone another round of cuts, this time affecting the NXT production crew. The NXT team is now said to be down to a skeleton crew, which essentially means they will be producing shows with the minimum amounts of people required. This follows a number of budget cuts through the last 18 months or so, including the release of on and off-screen talent. NXT is set to debut their brand new look and feel for the brand, with WWE said to be heading in a completely different direction for their developmental territory. NXT will now feature more larger homegrown wrestlers as they move away from the super indie product that they have been known for over the past number of years. The changes will be coming into play tomorrow night on Tuesday, live from a remodeled Capitol Wrestling Center. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head, hopefully, towards 100,000 subscribers. But now, let's press play on the video. And speaking of NXT, Samoa Joe has been forced to vacate the NXT Championship ahead of this week's reboot of the brand, citing problems with injuries. Joe released a video on Twitter to break the news, revealing that he has been told by the WWE medical team that he will not be able to compete at this time, and said, "Recently, WWE Medical has informed me that due to certain injuries, they'd like to have me step away from the ring for a brief but indeterminate amount of time. I realize this week we are on the cusp of a new NXT, we are on the brink of a new era in our history, and that era deserves a fighting champion. That's why it makes a difficult decision very easy to make. Effective immediately, I relinquish the NXT Championship." No specific details are currently known about what the injury is or how long it will take to recover, but Joe would give a warning to whoever ends up as champion next and said, "Best of luck to those who vie for it. My sincerest condolences to whoever wins, because I will be along shortly to recollect what is mine." Joe won the NXT title on August 22nd at the NXT TakeOver 36 event. This followed his recent return to WWE following a short-lived release, as Joe had been out of action since February 2020 and had been transitioned into the Raw commentary team before he was cut from the roster in April 2021. Head of NXT Triple H took it upon himself to get Joe under a new deal, this time as a wrestler on the NXT brand, as well as playing a role in coaching and scouting for the Performance Center. Being forced to relinquish the NXT belt is another blow for him after recently making a healthy return to the ring where he belongs. Hopefully we can see Samoa Joe back in action soon once he's dealt with the injuries he's suffering from. It's also been reported by Fightful that Joe was expected to appear on WWE Raw tonight in order to promote the relaunch of NXT this Tuesday. It's unclear exactly what Joe was supposed to be doing on the show, but according to the report, the original Raw script had him scheduled to appear. And finally, we go back to a report from the Wrestling Observer, and the Observer newsletter states that AEW have plans for a major rematch at some point in the future, expected to take place in early 2022. According to Dave Meltzer, current AEW Women's World Champion Britt Baker is set to take on Thunder Rosa once again, this following their recent Lights Out match on the St. Patrick's Day edition of Dynamite in March. The report states that multiple stipulations have been discussed, including a a cage match, and even a hair versus hair match. The idea is to build this up to be the biggest women's match in AEW history. The aforementioned Lights Out match is credited as being the moment Britt Baker was elevated to the next level despite coming out on the losing side. She was defeated after a Thunder Driver through a table, but would go on to win the AEW Women's World Championship shortly after, becoming the most popular star in the division. It would certainly be interesting to see a hair versus hair match, which would result in a drastic appearance change for one of the competitors. The match type is popular in Thunder Rosa's native Mexico, where mask or hair matches are considered the highest of stakes. And before you go, make sure you check out my updated list where I discuss the top 10 AEW debuts of all time.